A very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us for our first event of 2022, RTM Rail Safety, delivered to you, our valued audience, by Rail Technology magazine. A warm welcome to new faces joining for the first time, and hello to those who've returned from last year. Today's rail safety event will be packed full of opportunities to network and acquire lots of current sector knowledge. So I hope you're looking forward to what's to come today. The Rail Technology magazine team strives to deliver content which inspires innovation on the platform long after this event has finished. And it's important that we thank the industry leaders and experts who have taken time out to join us today to share their valuable insights. Due to the high standard of content we'll be sharing on our RTM 365 platform, it's worth me pointing out that all of the content is CPD certified. For every hour of content you watch live, you'll earn 1 CPD point. To receive your certificate, email the RTM team at marketing@cognitivepublishing.com. That's marketing@cognitivepublishing.com, and they'll sort it out. We also provide the opportunity to give back through some friendly competition. Whilst learning today, our gamification tools will be active. Score points by engaging with the platform's different elements. Join a live session, there's 50 points earned. Make a connection with another delegate in the platform, 100 points. Ask a question in a session or engage with one of our exhibitors in the digital marketplace, another 50. You get the gist. At the end of the event, those who finish in first, second, and respectively will have 250, 150 and £100 donated to either the Magic Breakfast charity or More Trees in their name and organisation. Magic Breakfast charity can give a child a nutritious breakfast and a chance to succeed at school with every pence donated. So a £100 donation means that nearly 300 children get a good start to their day. Or if you donate to More Trees, donated, a tree is planted, helping our climate. And of course, you can only be in with a chance of winning by engaging with the great content we have to share with you and your fellow delegates. So there's a bit of background to explain what's additionally on offer. Now let's move to the focus of today. Everyone has the right to go home safe at the end of every day. Passengers, the public, workers, anyone who comes into contact with our railways. Health and safety are paramount across all aspects of the rail industry in development, repair work, training, and day-to-day running of an efficient network. We do boast one of the safest rail networks in the world, but there's no room for complacency and plenty of work to be done to ensure the continued safety of all. Using technology to its full extent can improve potentially life. Ensuring staff are trained and equipped in their roles is another vital element. And of course, the mental well-being of those who run, work on and use rail services is important as we explore safety and the relevant topics around it. Whilst these topics being discussed in our panel discussions, don't forget we also have networking opportunities that can be accessed throughout the day via the speed networking function. And I encourage you to collaborate with your colleagues as another great source of education. This all plays a part in the community we're growing to extend the reach of knowledge and connections shared today, which can be accessed at any time to work with your busy schedules. Another function we're able to share with you on the RTM 365 platform that allows you to access a wealth of resources is our on-demand content section, as well as the digital marketplace, providing valuable expertise for you and your teams to digest at your leisure. And finally, feel free to share your thoughts and experiences across social media using the hashtag RTM365. That's hashtag RTM5. Now the scene is set, I'd like to hand you over to our first keynote speaker of the day, Dr. Stuart Smith, lead ergonomist at HS2 Limited, to present his A Safe at Heart Railway presentation. Stuart will give an overview of some of the health and safety by design work that's been done by HS2 in order to maximise safety for employees, passengers and the public. Areas of HS2 work that will be explained are depots, maintenance, operations and passenger interfaces. So here is Stuart's presentation.
Hello there, everybody. My name is Stuart Smith, so I'm an ergonomics lead at High Speed 2. And I'm going to talk to you today about some of the work we're doing across HS2 to ensure that in the future, when we're operational, our staff, our workers, our operators and the travelling public will all be as safe as possible.
I can offer you caramel tea if you
So,
want.
Caramel.
Chamomile.
Our main drive for health, safety and wellbeing is kind of captured into the Safe at Heart moniker. So basically there's a set of accountabilities which we hold as individuals, teams and organisations that work with for HS2, which drive our safety focus. So there's 7 focus areas under the umbrella of Safe at Heart, and as you can see that they're obviously key and very relevant to what the aim of this conference is today. So we're talking about workforce safety, workforce health and well-being, safe by design and how it's used and how we use this, and safe operations, which is obviously including maintenance as well, and is really one of the main focuses of my work and has been over my time in the rail industry and working for Network Rail also. So what I'm going to talk to you today is some of the work across depots, maintenance, ops and passenger interfaces for what we're doing to make sure things are as safe as possible. So I'm going to start here with telling you some information about our main rolling stock depot, which is Washwood Heath. So as you can see there, it's our main depot for looking after our rolling stock. It's a 24/7, 365 depot. It's permanently in use. In terms of the detail of it, we've got 16 stabling roads to berth, 1 train or 2 200-metre units. We've got various buildings which house staff, equipment, training, simulators. We've also got the train maintenance facilities, which is the largest building on site. And we've also got what's called the NIC, the Network Integrated Control Centre, which is the ops centre for HS2. So this is where HS2 is effectively the trains, the rolling stock are run from. These are where they're controlled from. So this is the heartbeat of HS2. It's quite a complicated depot in some ways in terms of we've got the train movements from the main line through to the east end of the stabling roads are actually automatic train ops controlled. So we have effectively mainline signalling, and these are managed by the Network Integrated Control Centre, and these movements are carried out by the train captains who will come off the main line and into the depot. The other movements, so from the stabling roads into the maintenance shed, are managed by depot control and are carried out by depot drivers. So we have that distinction there, which we obviously have to be aware of as we design and as we work. So some examples specifically here around how our design work is progressing in the trying and what we're trying to build into the design. So a big thing for human factors for ergonomics is for actually designing for how people will actually use the depot in the real world. So we're talking about work as done, as will be done, not work as imagined by your designers when they're sitting in a nice comfy office. We've got to think about how actually people in 3 o'clock in the morning who are out trying to clean a train or how to maintain a train, what they're going to be up against, what they're going to be facing, what do they need, what can we do for our design to improve their life. So we use things like day in the life ofs to explore and to understand and to document how people will move through their jobs, the tools they'll use, and we can then share that information with other disciplines so that the engineers, the architects, they understand this. And we also use learning from experience, so we'll use safety information. And there's a really good example from Rail Safety Standards Board, which is their Depot Safety Insights, which came out last year and has a lot of information on kind of incidents and information how depots need to be improved in the future, really. It's a good document, so I'd recommend if you're interested in depot safety that you get hold of that off their website. One of the main features of our depot is that our train preparation crew and train managers need to travel from their building through to the stabling platforms to get to their trains. And the way they're going to do this is through an underpass, which goes straight under the stabling roads with access up to each platform via stairs and a lift. The lift's primarily there for taking up heavy goods and stocks and things for cleaning the trains. So people haven't got to cross any train lines at all. They go through out of the building, which goes straight into the subway, the underpass, which then they can go up to. So that's great. That's a really good safe initiative for our depot. And we've also done a lot of evacuation scenario assessments as part of the design work in the phase we're at the moment for understanding how people will evacuate off stabling roads through the underpass, off the edges of the platforms on the stabling road. So we've got a good a good level of safety already designed in here. For the work that actually takes place on the platforms, so we've got a depot protection system in place, so the train presentation crew will use that to ensure that trains don't move while they're trying to work on them. And we've also got the ability to isolate individual roads from the overhead catenary system, the OCS. This is important because we will be having cabin cleaning activities being done on these the stadium roads, which is again quite unusual, I believe, for a depot, and that could involve the use of water and long-handled tools to clean windscreens, for example. So we need to be able to turn the overheads off to make sure people are safe. We do a lot of work on slip strips and falls minimisation. A lot of potential there and a lot of evidence for a high number of incidents that can happen with people. So we're doing a lot of good work around the lighting of areas, what surfaces people will be walking on, making sure we've got good drainage, making sure we've got good edge protection where there's a risk of a fall. So around stairwells, for example, and at certain areas of the platforms where there's restricted width or narrow width where people need to be protected from that edge by a design solution. And obviously we're also about separating people and vehicles inside and out of the buildings. So where there may be movements of cars, bicycles, pedestrians, we've considered that, and that's designed in. And also inside buildings, perhaps forklift trucks might be moving around. So we have clear segregation areas, and that's clear in our design at the moment for minimising that risk and making sure that separation is integral to the design. If I move now into maintenance, which is another key area of work for me. So there's the diagram there obviously shows your red zone in the middle, which is the danger zone, and your safe zone, which is the green. This will be consistent across HS2. So the OCS mask, the overhead catenary system mask, gives you that visual indication of where you are, if you're in a safe zone or a dangerous zone. So effectively, inside the OCS mask is a dangerous zone. You shouldn't be in there unless you've been told you should be. So this is nice, consistent across our railway, which is consistency is basically good. You don't want people trying to work out where they're safe or not. Also, we don't allow access to our viaducts or our tunnels. What we won't do whilst trains are moving around, there's too much risk there of the speed of the vehicle as it goes past, and the turbulence and the wind it can create could hurt people or drag tools into the train. So that's that. We won't do any line blockage work. All our work will be done under possessions protected zones, which I'll talk about in a minute. And we'll be using mobile maintenance trains for helping people travel to sites on them as well, so people go to the right place and people are working in a secure area with all the right equipment they need. So in terms of possessions and isolations, the aim is that you'll be taking your protected area of your possession and your isolation without going into that danger zone. It'll all be done remotely from a safe place. We really want to remove that need to be going onto track to put out things like boards or detonators. There's none of that. We won't be putting people at risk by going out onto site. Importantly, possessions and isolations will have the same limits. So you won't have an isolation ending its limit and then the possession carrying on. Staff will know if they leave the limits, they've left the limits for a possession and an isolation. Again, consistency is really key so people know what they're dealing with. And also importantly, staff, as they go to site and work, part of the process is actually a confirmation using technology if they are in the right location. There'll be something on site, something you scan maybe that will be confirmed through the system, yet you're actually where you're supposed to be. The system logs that, that's confirmed to whoever's in charge of your safe system of work. You can carry on. The data here on the right is some examples of where Smith's data for a 4-year period that I've used to kind of demonstrate why possessions and isolations is an area we need to be considering. So you can see there you're talking over 1,200 incidents a year, and you're also talking 1,500 mine injuries and the fatality, unfortunately, as well. One interesting thing there is that 5.6% of the incidents were actually life-saving rule breaches, which obviously for Neverell is an interesting thing that there's that many life-saving rule breaches going on. I think finally for maintenance, just a slide here about some of the remote asset monitoring we'll be doing. So again, reducing the need to go on or near the track, moving away from a man walking or a person walking down the line to actually look at some points to work out, are they okay? We'll be using real-time monitoring and technology to monitor our assets, and we've got a digital twin, which is basically a 3D replica, which will be as detailed as a real thing, which will help to incorporate all the data we're getting back from our reliability monitoring systems out on the railway, which will help anticipate any potential failures, and then we can basically work solutions to get our reliability up to a good level. In terms of ops, there's a few key areas here I've highlighted. So a really good one is that our operators will be able to reconfigure the areas of the railway they're controlling. So if an incident occurs, something's happening, they haven't got to try and carry on running the rest of the area of the railway they were. They can then focus just on that incident and controlling it and resolving it, so we can get back to running our trains. We're also making sure that our alarms and our alert strategy means that the right alarm goes to the right person at the right time. People know it's coming to them. They haven't got to try and interpret it. They know if they need to act on it, if it's for information, that kind of thing. We'll be using electronic written orders for our train captains, so that'll be mitigating comms errors in terms of critical voice comms. Won't be there as much, so we'll be using actual written comms, so people won't be mishearing or writing it down wrong. So that's all good in terms of human reliability. And there's a point there about adhesion management. So basically the system will ultimately update any braking characteristics upon detecting wheel slip, and that will be transmitted through the rest of the fleet there. So that's just an automated process to improve that wheel slip and adhesion management issue. And finally, just a slide here and some points about passenger safety. So you can see here, hopefully there's some passenger edge protection in place. So we'll be having that, and our terminus stations will have a barrier, but they'll have a gap where the doors of the train will open. The intermediate stations will have a barrier, but the doors will open. So you won't be able to go through that unless there's a train there with its door open. The actual platform training space will be level. A skirt will come out from the train when its doors open, which will come up to the platform that the passengers are on. There'll be no gap, and it will be level. People in, for example, wheelchairs will be able to move straight onto the train without assistance, which is obviously really good for them as individuals, as human beings. And also it means less manual handling. You haven't got to try and find somebody to lift you on or off the train, which is obviously good. We'll also be using technology to help guide passengers to the right platform for their train, but also to the right carriage and also to the right door for them to get onto. We have pretty rapid turnaround times at our stations when we're running, and so people need to be knowing where they're going is the right place. We can't afford the time for them to walk up or down a 400-metre train, and also when they're on the train, they don't want to be walking up and down a 400-metre train looking for their seat with their luggage. So just a little bit of information there about the passenger safety features and some of the ways we're trying to improve the passenger experience, but when we're up and running. So I think to summarise, I know what's been a very quick fly through some of the initiatives and some of the work we're doing to improve and to design safe operations and maintenance and facilities for our railway. Health and safety by design is obviously key. We're looking to eliminate health and safety risks now in the design stage as much as we can. We really don't want to have to rely on processes, rules, PPE. There's many instances out there that we can draw upon where processes fail, or people don't follow rules, or PPE doesn't do what it's supposed to do, or people forget it. We're trying to focus on learning from experience of what we can learn from incidents and trends across the rail industry. So as I've mentioned, Rail Safety Standards Board's SMIS data is really good. Their safety risk model is very good. There's plenty of information from network rail safety incidents that we can use to build our case and to build how we design our railway. And we're also using technology to improve safety and efficiency where appropriate, not just technology for tech's sake. And as an HF person, I've got to flag up here, obviously, that automating tasks doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going to be then brilliant, because you're effectively taking the human out of the loop. So at some point, if the automation fails, the person has got to try and work out what's going on. But that's part of our HF work remit. So just to summarise there, the last point, the main message from HS2 is that everyone working on and impacted by HS2 has got the right to go home safe as well. And I've certainly, every meeting I have, all my work is all around trying to make sure that is the message that we drive over, and that's what we're striving for. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you listening to what was a very quick fly through. I'm quite happy if anyone wishes to get in touch to chat about any of this or from more information. My email address is on there, and thanks. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thanks, Stuart. That was a fantastic fly through. Thank you very much for opening the day for us and also giving your contact details out. That's fantastic. Despite being one of Europe's safest railways, sadly, major and fatal accidents do sometimes occur. As we look to the future, we understand every role undertaken in rail must have staff and the community's safety at the heart of the project. If railways are not properly utilised by the public, they pose a considerable risk. Therefore, human behaviour needs into decision-making and planning alongside the importance of safe infrastructure. This panel discussion will look at these factors across stations, level crossings and trackside. To help us improve awareness on such a key topic, I'd like to welcome Uduebor, Principal Health and Safety Manager at Network Rail, Olivia Cayley, Head of the Rail Programme for the Samaritans, and Ian Meredith, Operations Standard Manager for West Coast Rail. And I always like to make these debates a real conversation, including your voices. So please do use the Q&A function, which you'll find on the bottom of your screen. Any questions or thoughts you may have. So got a full house this morning. Good morning to our first panelist of the day. Lovely to see you there. Obi, may we start with you and talk about how safe are passengers and the public on and around the railway?
I think at this point in time, taking into account the use of the current use of the infrastructure and ongoing works, I would say the passengers are on a safer level than we've ever seen before. But that obviously has underlying factors, because taking into consideration COVID, which we've just experienced, the usage of the infrastructure has been on its highest low ever. So we have had a low number of use of passengers on the infrastructure. So because of that, also that has also offered us opportunities to actually quickly implement quite a lot of improvement and enhancement of the infrastructure, and using the opportunities we've had during the COVID-19 crisis to basically carry out quite a lot of improvement on development on our works in order to ensure the railway is a whole lot safer for passengers. So in answer to your question, it's a whole lot safer than it's ever been before, at the moment.
Thank you for kicking us off. Ian, following on from that, Obi's saying there we're safer than we've ever been before. But as passenger numbers increase and we sort of emerge from the pandemic, I'm just wondering, what are the new risks that we face?
I think what we need to understand is some of the old risks re-emerging. The railway we used to work with pre-pandemic is still there when it returns. So all risks that we need to be and the new risks is the railway is going to be used completely differently. There's going to be more commuter than the traffic rather than and then obviously leisure is going to change as well. So it's about unpicking the practices that we put in place as regards to the new risks for the pandemic, but then addressing the old risks as well. So it's quite trying to have a holistic view and quite be flexible with those risks that are emerging.
And what are the old risks, Ian, that we must still be very mindful of?
That's a great question. So the old risks is the passenger numbers that are going to increase. So our staff, particularly, have been working in the last 2 years as a sort of an underload, where there's not many passengers around, there's not a lot of risks, but those risks coming back to the railway, new people coming back to the railway, people who have not used it for a while, a lot of nervousness around there and anxieties. So those risks around the people coming back into the network really is that major old risk really. Yeah,
you're right about people's nervousness, and I've noticed that. I'm a confident rail traveller, and the pandemic hasn't stopped me being confident. But I do notice that when I'm on the railway, particularly with people perhaps who disability or who are older. So we've got to be very mindful of that. Olivia, let's bring you into the conversation if we may. The Samaritans Rail Programme is something that I don't know much about. I know it was established in 2010 in partnership with Network Rail, BTP and the wider sector, but tell us a bit about the programme and what your aims are and what it's designed to achieve.
Thanks, Helen. Really Great to be on the panel today. So as you said, we've been running now for around 12 years in partnership with Network Rail in the wider rail industry. And it's with the aim of reducing the lives lost to suicide on the rail, but more broadly than that, creating a culture of well-being and safety and support for those who may need it. And we do that in a myriad of sort of interconnected activities, but it's all focused on prevention methods and also reactive methods to support people should an incident occur, with a really heavy emphasis on how we, as I said, create that culture of awareness and support for those in need. So we deliver training to rail staff, which focuses on how we upskill them and improve their confidence around how to potentially spot the signs of someone who needs support on the infrastructure and then make a safe intervention using listening and conversation techniques. We also run really large national campaigns across the whole of the rail industry. One of the most well-known is called Small Talk Saves Lives and is all about encouraging the public to trust their instincts and strike up conversation using everyday introductions if they think someone just might not be having a good day or might be at risk of sort of being in crisis. And we do a range of other activities that would take me a long time to go into. We have a large regional team, so they sit across the UK, in Scotland, England and Wales, really embedded at community level, so looking at different needs and risks that communities may have and how we ensure we have the right partnerships across other charities and sort of local authorities. So it's a really wide-ranging programme that we wouldn't be able to run without the support of the fantastic rail staff that every day are out there sort of essentially safeguarding and shepherding commuters and passengers with a lot of passion around mental health and well-being. So we couldn't do it without them.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. I'm looking forward to finding out more about the different things that you do. Obhiye, I'm just wondering, do you have anything to add? We talked a bit about the pandemic there, about the impact and influence that COVID's brought in ensuring passenger and public safety on the railway. Obviously, you touched on that in your first answer. Did you want a bit of a deeper dive on that before we move on to other things?
Oh yeah, I think. Well, put it this way: the impact of COVID-19 has basically been worldwide. So. And that is basically cut across every single industry. In specific reference to the railways, I think we've had the issue more on the occupational health impact of passengers, where people are being wary about coming into the stations and being just the question is, am I safe traveling on the train? Am I safe walking into a station? And quite a lot of the improvements, there was obviously the engagement of our supply chain in ensuring we've got adequate measures in place in regards to using the up-to-date, the technological and at the same time biological equipment and maintenance for ensuring we can actually bring people and individuals into the infrastructure a whole lot safer. So from the cleaning of the trains, the rolling stock, the bringing in of staffs to maintain the 24/7 maintenance of the stations and the railway stations and the trains itself has been very, very active. And as you see the numbers, like Olivia mentioned, as you see the numbers continue to increase now, people coming into the stations and using them, the assurance is a whole lot better. While as Ian has mentioned, the risk hasn't gone away. All the pre-existing risks are still much present. So the question is, we just need to make sure that whatever measures we had previously in place, we need to begin to ask ourselves, are they adequate now for the new users coming into the infrastructure? Because we have a whole new set of users coming into the infrastructure, and the dynamics of the use of the stations now a whole lot more different as well. So that's been a very key area which we've actually focused on, giving assurance that it's safe, you can use the infrastructure, and at the same time ensuring the previous mitigations in place are still very much active and appropriate.
Well, in fact, you were saying in your first answer that we have to not forget the sort of old risks that have sort of not drifted a bit, but while we've not been travelling, it's easy to forget to not pay attention to those old risks. But we're in a kind of strange transition period now. What are the things that we need to focus on during this transition period as we sort of come out of this very odd 2-year period that globally we've all lived through into what hope will feel like a more normal world again?
I think from our viewpoint, really, is the world is getting back to normal. The confidence is growing. We've got some really big events, high-profile events, such as the Commonwealth Games. Our event management of that is really important. We're unsure how people are going to use the network, because this is our sort of our first big event, really, for nationally. So there's going to be a lot of people come from all points of from the network, all come to one location within the Midlands. So it's really, that is a good opportunity to sort of understand of how the railway is going to be used. It really is a good opportunity for us to sort of put our finger in the air slightly and say, this is going to, what happens with the Commonwealth Games is really going to shape the way we manage risks and the railway in general with safety.
Yeah, and in fact, we were hosting the Midlands Rail Conference at the Vox just a few weeks ago, and had a presentation on the Commonwealth Games where they were saying that you want the Commonwealth Games to be remembered for sport, not transport, don't we? Because it's such a massive challenge. It was fascinating to hear all the facts and figures of what's going on behind the scenes there. I'm just looking in as we chat at the live Q&A section, and John Baker has a question which I think is appropriate for you to tackle, if that's okay. John says, how significant is the loss of experienced staff? Recent rounds of voluntary severance and retirements and ageing workforce means those with the most experience and memory of why we do things are leaving RAIB, and we've already noticed a loss of corporate memory, and this mirrors our experience, says John.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. And it's something we are really mindful of, that corporate knowledge and that corporate memory that's going to go with people who have been in the railway 30, 40, even 20 years. 15 years ago yesterday was Grey Rig. Now I've spoken to a lot of Grey Rig incident involving Virgin Trains, and obviously I spoke to a lot of our colleagues yesterday, and we're talking about this, and a lot of the people weren't aware of the detail regarding that. So, we made us sit back and think, there's some work that we need to do now. How do we ensure that, you're never going to capture all that corporate knowledge that's going to leave the railway. But we need to make sure that the succession planning is there in place, and we do it prior to people moving out of the business. I've been here 20 years. I've been on the railway now, and, I speak to people who are doing 40 years, twice my mate years, and the knowledge that they've taken with them is you can't replace that kind of knowledge. However, I think what we need to do is sort of refresh the reasons why things are in place, because that's really important.
Yeah, I always think we should have some mentoring scheme. It probably exists, but with apprentices and people who have retired, because my grandfather died at 100, and he died a wise old man with so much knowledge, and yet we retire people off, don't we, around 60, 65, whatever the retirement age is, and suddenly they're not valued anymore. And when you retire, when you've done your 40 years or whatever, and I hope your knowledge will be utilised in that kind of way. Olivia, so many people, didn't they, suffered with their mental health? I'm not just talking linked to the rail, but during the pandemic, suffered with anxiety and worries over the whole pandemic. Is that where perhaps your Small Talk Saves Lives campaign can help, not just in the rail industry, but help us all sort of understand how to recognise when people do need some help and are perhaps afraid or nervous or not confident enough to ask for it?
Yeah, 100%, Helen. I think Small Talk it's not just a message that's for the railway. It's focused there, and it's supported and invested in by the rail sector, which is fantastic, and enables Samaritans to spread that message of awareness. But you're right that I think now more than ever, after 2 years of, for some people, complete isolation, that looking out for one another and just sort of being a bit more vigilant and warm and open is really, really important. And I think we had the last Small Talk campaign run last summer, as people were starting to return to the rail, as lockdown eased. We're going to thankfully be running another one of those campaigns later this year. So it's in its 6th iteration now. And I think that just shows that message is still as relevant today as it was sort of 4 or 5 years ago. And essentially that their campaign message, as I said, is just all about, we have those skills internally. But I think sometimes, whether that's British culture or particularly after the pandemic, being slightly reticent to get into contact with someone, actually this is just about starting up a conversation, and all it can take is, you know, do you know where I could get a coffee, or do you know what the time is? And that can interrupt someone's maybe crisis thinking. It's a myth, actually, that someone who may be in crisis or contemplating suicide, that is a fait accompli. That's a myth, actually. All it takes is that sort of break in someone's thinking for us to pull them back and potentially get them to safety. And so that small talk campaign really focuses on that for passengers. We then have another campaign which is called Real People, Real Stories. And that is focused on people who need that message of hope and how to seek help. So we use case studies of people with lived experience that are saying, I got help and this is now where I am today. And that, yet again, is funded and invested in by the rail sector. So we're very, very thankful to that. It's a really important message.
So important, because actually when you give examples like that, you know, whilst you do a very good job of talking about what your what the organisation does, what the Samaritans rail programme does, there's nothing actually like hearing that from who's got a lived experience. So they're very powerful ways of telling stories, I think. Maybe there's been a lot of, you know, construction going on recently on the railways. I'm thinking, I live in London, so for me, Euston's the bear that I have to contemplate on almost a daily basis because it's such a big project. How important is it to eliminate and reduce, you know, risks, not just to the rail travelling, you know, passengers, but also members of the public pre and post construction work on infrastructure and stations, etc.?
I think it is one of the utmost consideration that we have to give when we carry out construction works. The reason is this: if we fail at any point in time during the delivery, pre or post construction, in keeping the public and passengers safe, we will get shut down. And it's part of the reason why we have the enforcement authorities like the OR and the HSC who are actively have oversight of the activities we undertake to ensure we actually keep within those guidelines. And also within the regulations, the construction design management regulations, we have, you know, high responsibilities to the public to ensure they're safe at all times, even from intruders into our sites of works. We have to protect them. So that is also a consideration. So it is paramount. It's from the point of design to from the point of actual construction, and even at the point of putting the asset into use and maintenance in future. That at every point in the stage, that the safety of the individuals who work within the infrastructure, who utilize the infrastructure, or who were third parties and coexist with the infrastructure are kept safe at all times.
And fitting in with that, Obhiye, a question from Fraser Scott. Fraser says, as customers have returned to rail, we've seen an increase in slips, trips and falls across the various routes. A large proportion of these have been through behavioural causation and appear to be people forgetting how to navigate the rail network. What ways can we ensure that passengers take on the importance of safe behaviour and are given the information on the possible risks?
It's quite interesting you mentioned that it's a two-way street, and this takes back to the question Ian mentioned about the pre-existing risk, and slips, trips and falls tops the highest amount of on top of the events that passengers actually experience on the stations and on the platforms. Wow. It does, and even within the operational side of so basically you're looking at the operational side of the house where the staff work. We have that as one of our top issues as well. Staff slipping, tripping and falling on themselves and over themselves. One of the key things, as Ian has mentioned, is when we look at the stations now, especially with the influx of a new set of users coming in, we need to do more around how we communicate and offer directions and information to staff. And like Olivia mentioned, someone walking up and having a conversation, you know, just basically pointing people in the right direction. And I think it doesn't start from when you arrive at the station. It actually arrives from before you set off from home. You know, people planning their journey should be able to go online and get adequate information to understand, where do I start, where do I stop, who do I go to for information, or where can I actually get some advice or guidance. So it should be a seamless journey, basically, right from home to your point of destination and back home. And I think the technology will play a part there, but at the same time, the face-to-face consideration of having people on the ground to guide people around the station is also very critical as well.
Slips, trips and falls, Ian, West Coast?
It is. It's always always an issue. I mean, what we've seen is because of the coronavirus and that touch points, people are less likely to use the touch points as to steady themselves. 3 points of contact going downstairs. There is a nervousness of touching sort of handrails. I think one benefit from COVID is the fact the enhanced cleaning and occupational hygiene. We've enhanced that. I think throughout the rail industry we've done that, and I think that gives confidence to our passengers, seeing that walking through trains, there's always someone cleaning, always wiping down. I think stations are the same, and that will give confidence for people can start using handrails and start using, rather than, I think face masks and face coverings have probably contributed to trips and falls as well, because the restricted sighting because of steam up of glasses.
I'm laughing because I've tripped and fallen a lot when I've got my glasses on and the mask. And I actually don't need them when I'm walking. They're really for reading, but occasionally on a train, I sort of nipped to the loo, forgotten I've got my glasses on, I've got my mask on, they're steamed up, and it looks like I've had a sherry too early in the day.
Yeah, so that they all contribute, the touch points, not using the touch points, the face coverings. So it all contributes to, obviously, slips, trips and falls.
Yeah, I do think people have got kinder, though. I've noticed a difference on the railways. I think people are a little bit more sensitive to those who aren't as confident. I've found people have been chatting a bit more on the platform and sort of a bit more mindful of, just generally helping. And Ian, how are organisations and industries, do you think, going to keep up with change? Because we are at a time now of massive change in the sector, aren't we?
We are, and we talked. Somebody mentioned about the VSS, about that around all that of the workforce, reducing workforce. It's got, that is in itself is a change. The way the railway is used as well on a daily basis. It's about understanding what practices have been put in place during this horrid industry, and then unpicking all those in it's a great opportunity to review and reset of all those years of practices, and and which we've done so many risk assessments through COVID. It's been so fluid, but I think now is an opportunity to reset and review and understand how the railway is changing and how it's going to be used. I think this is almost it's a moment in time for the railway of completely resetting, hundreds of years worth of practices.
Yeah, absolutely. Olivia, what role do volunteers play in the Samaritans rail programme?
A really significant role, and something yet again that I suppose relates to what you were saying before, Helen, that staff have their part in doing this, but actually volunteers come from a completely different perspective, giving their time freely and with a lot of passion and dedication. So Samaritans benefits from around 20,000 volunteers across the UK, and they get involved with what we refer to as outreach, and that's delivered in a number of ways depending on sort of the needs of the rail sector. So that we deliver what are called community roadshows, and our volunteers are present at those roadshows, typically in areas where we feel the community would benefit from knowing more about Samaritans and the services we offer. And our volunteers are out there talking to people, often delivering what we refer to as emotional support. And yet again, just reducing that stigma around talking about our mental health and well-being. I think the rail sector has come such a long way in the value and importance they place on psychological well-being alongside physical well-being. I think historically that that was always held up as the thing that got the most time and resource, and I understand why. And over the 12 years we've been working with the sector, we've really seen that shift into the psychological well-being of staff being as much as a priority. And our volunteers also support with staff wellbeing. So sometimes after a traumatic incident has occurred, we will send volunteers down to the station and they will support staff and talk to them, and often deliver some of that sort of post-trauma emotional support, and staff. We often get fantastic feedback from staff around the difference that makes, and also to commuters that may have witnessed an incident that week. So yeah, they get involved in a myriad of different ways, but it's a fantastic sort of service and commitment that they give to the programme.
Sounds extraordinary. Obhiye, I'm just thinking, we again touched very lightly on technology earlier in the conversation. You know, how is technology going to help ensuring a safe railway for all?
I think that would, well, put it this way, the opportunities that technology presents for us in regards to enhancing safety for every single individual who lives or walks around the infrastructure is enormous. But the question is just making sure we're identifying the right technology, and obviously ensuring that the technology itself is well communicated to the users. Because the danger we usually face many times is we engage the use of technology just for the sake of the fact that we just want to utilize technology without understanding the end users and the market itself, which that technology will impact. So the key thing is the early stages of identifying the right kind of technology starts off from understanding the user market, the end customer, which is the passengers, the public, and third parties, and ensuring that it aligns with the behaviors which we're trying to either enhance or we're trying to obviously change over time, especially typically around level crossings, for example, where we have a lot of issues around people jumping barriers, people trying to cross the lines while the traffic is still fully operational. Those are some of the areas where we could actually enhance the use of technology to actually help to keep the public safe. Even the issues around platform edges, where we have a whole lot of incidents around platform edges where people are trapped between the train and the platform itself, or people falling over the tracks. That's another very critical area where technology has become very, very important to us. And the key one also is around the bit around isolation. Now, we have a disparity depending on what part of the country you started at any point in time. We have the overhead electrification, and we have the what we call the third and fourth rail electrification. So one over the ground, one on the ground. And we obviously have to apply a lot of technology, which helps us as well when we're deploying people to go out on the infrastructure to carry out works, where we can limit the need of them have to physically going out there, where we can remotely utilize technology and equipment and apparatus to actually do carry out isolation. So it is quite very critical in that sense that where contact between individuals and the operational aspect, infrastructure, technology obviously would help to put a safe barrier in ensuring that we keep people apart safely at all times as well.
Ian, presumably that's something you have things to add to on the technology front.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially regards to our train drivers, the use of technology will, that live information we can supply to drivers, such as blanket emergency speed restrictions, which are becoming more frequent now due to weather conditions. I mean, we all know about the storms we had over the weekend and how that affected the railway. And if we can use technology to get to live information to drivers, safety information regarding blanket speed restrictions or any other restrictions, and obviously done in a safe manner, because obviously you've got to balance that with distraction. But ultimately, technology is the way forward, and we're probably underused on the railway. Probably if you look at aviation industry, the way they use technology, I think we, as a railway, we could learn a lot.
Absolutely. There's just a quick question, Ian, from Martin here. Does the data that you have, we're sort of flipping back to a bit of our older conversation, does the data you have enable a distinction to be made between incidents in commuters versus one-off occasional travellers? And if so, are there any significant trends that you've spotted?
It's usually not directly, no. I think it's mainly to do with weather, underfoot weather conditions. That's our main trends. I mean, obviously the old Victorian stations that we, is our main areas of risk. The most up-to-date stations, such as, more like London Euston, there's very, very few, sort of passenger incidents apart from like running for trains. But it's usually underfoot conditions that cause our issues around Victorian stations.
I'm going to end with Olivia, if I may. I just wonder, Olivia, first of all, if I can just ask, what are perhaps some of the most impactful changes that you think have been achieved by your programme to date? And if there's anybody listening to this in our audience today that feels they want to get in touch and get involved, how do they do it? So that's a bit of a double question for you, but starting on the most impactful changes you think that have been made.
I think sort of two things that I'd reflect on today. One is, as I said earlier, that sort of culture shift around mental health and well-being, being sort of at the core of what the rail sector do so well. And I think it's something they should be really proud of, as a huge complex industry that put their weight behind that culture shift over the last 12 years. I think, secondly, we've now on the programme hit a marker. Over the next month, we'll have trained 25,000 rail staff in our what's called Managing Suicidal Contacts course, how to spot the signs of someone in distress and make a safe intervention, and hopefully move them into a place of sort of a recovery journey, which is really crucial. So that's a really big achievement, but still scratching the surface, which sort of segues nicely into, if you are interested in the training or you want to find out more about the programme and how you can get involved, then you can turn to the Samaritans website. There's a big section on the rail programme. And then also we have an email address called railcompaniestraining@samaritans.org, and you can access our fully funded free training courses via that email address.
Gosh, that's fantastic. You're leaving on a very high and inspirational note. Obi, Ian and Olivia, you've been fantastic first panellists, and I do hope that I'll end up talking to you again at one of our future virtual events, or maybe one in person, which would be lovely. Thank you so much for your time. Lots of information to absorb and take away there from our first discussion. So let's take a break now, time to digest what's been covered so far. If you have a chance, do engage with the speed networking functionality as an icebreaker. I'll see you back here at 10:40.